This programme was made with support from the National Lottery Heritage Fund. On the Heritage Channel tonight, Gemma signs up for life on the Grimsby fishing fleet. We explore the ghostly goings-on aboard the Ross Tiger and hear some fishy tales from former trawlermen. Welcome to the Heritage Channel, coming to you this month from the fabulous Fishing Heritage Centre here in the heart of Grimsby.
Opened in 1991, this multi-award-winning visitor attraction celebrates the rich history of our coastal community, including impressive displays and an immersive journey through the life of the trawlerman.
I have to go back to the early 1980s, and at that time we were experiencing really the last throes of our world-famous fishing industry. So there was an awful lot of work behind the scenes to think of how we could preserve that story of Grimsby. And they didn't want this to just be looking at bits of our past in glass cases. They wanted this to be an immersive experience where we could really try and preserve an experience of what our town was about. In 1991, this multi-sensory permanent exhibition opened here, which won just about every award in the country. There was an awful lot of pride in the way that with sounds and smells and movements and original artefacts, and we'd kind of saved a little piece of our famous fishing heritage.
The Heritage Centre is a fantastic mix of historical objects, including our historic trawlers and the Perseverance behind us, which is one of our historic vessels. We have displays of 1950s costume, some of our amazing ship models, of which we have over 160 in our collection, and lots of things to do with maritime heritage, particularly around the early 50s. What's really special about our museum is that when you come in, you're able to go on a trawlerman's journey, which means that you can experience what a trawlerman would have experienced when they were going on a fishing trip. You start off at the signing on office where you go and sign on for your trip, and then you take the journey of that trawlerman all the way through from their home in their backyard, through actually stepping onto the ship with the skipper waving you on as you come on, into a radio room. The radio room's got all the radio equipment that they would have had on the ship, and a lot of the things that we actually have on display in the museum, because of the time period when the museum was built in the late 80s, early 90s, a lot of the trawlers in Grimsby were being scrapped. So the museum was lucky enough to actually get real objects from the ships to include into the exhibition spaces. So it's really unique and something you probably couldn't do now. From the radio room, you step into our wheelhouse, which is on the bridge at the front of the ship. So you've got the big steering wheel there. That wheelhouse is a real wheelhouse that was lifted into the site, actually, as it was being built, and then they built around it. From there, you go through onto our moving deck. That display shows a deck on a trawler, and it's moving with the waves. So if you're seasick, it's probably not the best place to spend too much time. From there, you move into one of our more traditional display spaces, I suppose, which is all about apprentice boys, and we've got some historical objects out, talking about the young men and boys that were going out on their first fishing trip and what that was like and how they experienced that, and the difficulties being a young person being thrown into this very, very difficult job. From there, you move into what we call the icy deck. So that is the deck of a trawler, but it's all covered with ice, and you can see a gentleman up the top who's got an axe in his hand, and he's bashing the ice away from the ship. When it's very cold and you've got water and it's wet, the ice that can build up on the trawler and make the trawler quite top heavy. And it doesn't matter if you've been working an 18-hour shift fishing, if that happens, you've got to get out your bunk and go and deal with that. It's life or death. So from the very cold environment in there, you descend down into the boiler room. Because our museum is set in the early 1950s, the trawlers then were all steam trawlers, and steam trawlers needed the engine to be run by coal. And you had someone called a fireman, who is actually in the display down there, actually putting the coal into the furnace to steam the ship, make the ship go. There you're moving through onto the lower part of the moving deck display, so you do get a real sense of that movement on the moving deck, and you can see all the different trawlermen doing the different jobs on the ship. From the lower part of the moving deck, we're going round into the galley, where you'll meet the cook. The whole of the galley is on a bit of a tilt, and the reason for that is to show that it didn't matter what the weather was doing. People have got to eat. If you're going to have those men working 18 hours on deck, they need food. A lot of people say it's the most important person on the ship. You need to eat, you need that food, and a bad cook would not last very long. Then you move through into the forecastle, which is where all the bunks are, where they would have those precious few hours sleep. You can see the traditional bunks we've got in the displays that have got quite a large lip on them to stop you tipping out of bed, but I'm sure the trawlermen didn't spend as much time as they would have liked in there. So that's the end of the journey on the ship. And then you move through into what we call the lumpers area, and this is when the ships come back into dock. The lumpers come on and they have to get all of that fish out of that ice into baskets and then up and out onto the dock. So that's the job that those guys are doing. The next display is the settling office, and that's where you're going in to get your wages. Now, if you've had a good trip, hopefully you're going to get quite a bit of money. If you'd had a bad trip, you might not get paid very much. And if you'd bought things from the bond locker, or you'd had to replace some of your kit, you might actually end up owing the company money. Then you move into Mrs. Mogg's room, as we call it, and it's a 1950s living room. In there you meet Mrs. Mogg, and she's being met by the port missioner from the Fisherman's Mission, and he's delivering some really sad news. And in this case, and this is a real story that we're representing here, she lost her husband and her son aboard a ship called the Laforet, which was lost during the 1950s. That's highlighting the real human cost of trawling, because it was a really, really dangerous occupation. People loved what they did, but also it was really, really dangerous. A lot of lives were lost at sea, particularly in Grimsby. From there you move into what it's all for, which is the fish. And we've got a lovely fish and chips restaurant from the 50s with a real 1950s fryer in there as well, and a lady there getting ready to serve you your fish. And that's what it was for. It was about feeding the nation its favourite dish, and that's what all those men went out there to do, was to catch that fish. From there you're moving into the 1950s pub. Just like with a lot of the pieces that we've got on display throughout the museum that came off real ships, a lot of the stuff in the pub came from a real pub as well. You can see some guys in there all suited and booted. You get your suit on the way home and come out and go and have a few drinks at the pub. And they used to call the guys the 3-day millionaires, because if they had a good fishing trip, get the nice suit on, they're off down Freeman Street, they've got the money in their pocket, and they'd have a good time for 3 days, but then they're back for 3 weeks on the ships after that. So that's why we called them 3-day millionaires. Then you finish in this beautiful space here, the atrium, where we've got the Perseverance. She dates from 1914, and she was more of an inland water trawler rather than one that was going out and catching fish in middle and deep water. In this space as well, we've got some amazing street sort of scenes, and we've got old newsagents and old ladies outfitters as well. So it's a really nice street scene to finish off the displays. So when you've finished enjoying all these amazing immersive displays that we've got here, you can head into our amazing gift shop and pick up a few mementos of your trip, and into our galley cafe for a cup of tea and a slice of cake as well. If you want to actually experience what life was like on a real trawler, we have our amazing 1950s Grimsby trawler, Ross Tiger, and you can go on a tour with her.
Some say that the Fishing Heritage Centre is home to the spirit of a former tour guide and skipper. There have also been unusual goings-on aboard the Ross Tiger. A smell of food was reported wafting from the galley, but the stove hadn't been used in almost 30 years. Perhaps the spirit of an old cook was hard at work. Moored on Alexander Dock next to the Heritage Centre, the Ross Tiger offers visitors the chance to see what life was like on a real trawler and meet some of the men who worked on them.
We're so fortunate that we do still have ex-fishermen that work with the museum. And that is unique because it's not just about saying that you went to sea. You also need an ability to communicate that. We've had some wonderful, wonderful people that have been able to engage people and excite people and bring that story to life based on their own knowledge.
You had a skipper at the top, then you had the mate, and then you had what was a third hand, and he was sort of the go-between between the skipper and mate and the crew. The cook was just a dedicated cook. But if you were heavy fishing or something, if he was a decent sort of a guy, he'd probably come on the deck with you after tea and do a bit of gutting. Same with the engineers. They were actually dedicated engineers, but sometimes they'd come on the deck and maybe gut a few fish.
Not all of them did that. When we used to be getting the fishing, if we was getting a lot of fish, they'd have their head stuck out the door at the back, looking down, see how much fish was coming in, because it was their wages as well. I mean, it was a tough life, no getting away from it. And we worked all hours God sends and that, but it was a good life in a way.
There were some skippers that were very, very nice, like myself and Bob. And then there were some who were not so nice. And if the certain skippers were earning a lot of money, they could get away with murder.
I mean, a skipper on a trawler was God, and you did what you was told half the time on them ships.
My best trip was actually in that ship. And we broke the port record for that class of ship. We made 49,000. Unfortunately, I only held the record for about an hour and a half, because the next ship that landed on the same day, it made 50,000.
Like Dennis, we came in and we broke a record. The next day, somebody else and broke the record again.
The worst trip, I was mate of the Ross Puma, and we ran aground on the Orkney Islands, and that was quite scary. It certainly cured my constipation, that is for sure. Yeah, the Long Hope lifeboat got us off and took us into the Orkney Islands.
When I first started, we had to buy everything. Our bedding, boots, gloves, knives.
If you were a decky and you didn't like that ship for some reason, there was hundreds of ships to pick from. You didn't, so you could leave that one and go in another one. So when you did that, you rolled all your gear up, including your bed, and took it with you to the next ship. There was no shelter decks like they have nowadays. You were out in the open. You can't mend nets with gloves on. Can you imagine in freezing conditions, bare-handed, you had to do it? I mean, can you imagine the biggest roller coaster you've ever been on, standing up and starting to use your hand without holding on to the roller coaster, and then you start to mend nets or gut fish or whatever. That's what it was like.
Ever going to come back?
That ship, as she laid there now, is the heart and soul of this town. The ship and this place must be preserved. You must never forget.
It is part of the heritage, and if you've not got that, you've not got anything. I'd do it again tomorrow.
Yeah, oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I'd love to go back.
Education has always been really important to the Fishing Heritage Centre, and today we've got a very dedicated education officer, Sarah Spencer, and she works to continue to build that relationship with schools that engage with us at the museum here.
It's amazing to stand at the entrance and watch them come in, because the building itself is just unlike anything most of them have ever been to before. They're so excited. One of the latest things I've been working on is making up some loans boxes. The boxes themselves are created as replicas of Grimsby fish boxes that would have actually been seen on the docks in the 1950s. And they're full of handling objects, smells, lots of reading material, all sorts of things based on 1950s life or the fishing industry itself.
In other heritage news, students at Little Coats Primary School have been researching local history for a project to design signs for the High Street Regeneration Programme.
And work begins early next year at Our Big Picture to improve the access of their Grade 2 listed building on Bethlehem Street.
And if you enjoy a bit of musical nostalgia, you can join tours of the Ross Tiger sister ship, the Ross Revenge, famous as the home of the 1950s pirate broadcasting station, Radio Caroline.
On a recent visit to North East Lincolnshire, Darren Henley from Arts Council England visited local culture projects and met the Creative Board and Creative North East Links team to review achievements, answer questions and discuss working together to develop the cultural heritage of the region.
Organisations involved in Heritage Open Days met this month at Cleethorpes Town Hall to discuss exciting new ideas and plans for Open Day events in 2025.
New funding announced this month from Create North East Links. It'll provide up to £9,000 of support for heritage and cultural projects in North East Lincolnshire, and applications are open until the 13th of January.
There are new opportunities for individuals and organisations in North East Lincolnshire to host literary events and activities as part of the Hammond House Annual Literary Festival, thanks to additional support from Arts Council England. The festival will run from the 10th to the 28th of February and include activities in local schools, community organisations and writers' groups, as well as the book fair, workshops and awards ceremony at the University Centre Grimsby. Contact Elise Ballard for more information. Well, that's all from the Heritage Channel tonight. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and Facebook page to make sure you don't miss any of our programmes.
And for the latest arts and entertainment news, why not visit our sister channel, Billboard TV.
Oh, from everyone on the Heritage Channel. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next month for more news
Views
and local stories.